Canada Dry Sessions, take 7. Hello and welcome back to the Blackfoot Book Club again for another special edition. Yes, a special edition from my 4th self-published book, Chasing the Impossible and a Sword of Damocles, which I'll show you one more time like some weird magician's assistant. It's a personal story. It's the second personal story of 8 contained within the book that I'm holding, which I'm immensely proud of. And it's the book on Liverpool Football Club I've always wanted to write. However, the proviso as always, because it's a personal chapter, it's a very long chapter, so I'm going to allow myself some stumbles and silly bumbles along the way because I'm just fooling around in front of a video camera. Also, please note, no horses were harmed in the making of this video. Paris St Germain 3, Liverpool 0. When Liverpool drew Paris St Germain from the pot of 3 other available teams in the semi-final of the 1996-1997 European Cup Winners' Cup, it was greeted, almost unanimously, as the best available draw. They'd avoided crack Italian outfit Fiorentina and Spanish giants Barcelona, and whilst PSG were the cup holders, they were seen as the easier of 3 very difficult opponents, and so the song of the time, Rotterdam by the Beautiful South, was lyrically twisted and sung at every game. Rotterdam was the destination of the final in just over a month, and Steve the taxi driver and I were desperately hoping we'd get to experience our 3rd European adventure together with Liverpool this season alone, and after going to Switzerland for the 2nd round first leg encounter with Sion. Switzerland, France and possibly now Holland all in the same season. We were on the travel operators list after our trip to Switzerland and now France, so there was a very good possibility we'd be attending a European final in Holland. The Reds just needed to dispose of PSG first, and the 2 Steves would be Rotterdam bound. Steve and I reunited with Dover and our pickup spot after our journey to Switzerland earlier in the season and safely met with the coach, which was a lively one to say the very least. And much more so than the wheels that rolled us to Switzerland just 6 months before, and after only a few hours, half a dozen at most, we were on the outskirts of Paris and in search of our hotel. Safely decamped and checked in, the itinerary was simple. After arriving at the crack of dawn, the day was now to ourselves to explore Paris if we wished, lunch at 1 PM and coach departure for the ground at 4:30 PM due to safety concerns. Our safety. We made some friends on the coach, names now sadly a long ago lost memory, but we duly explored Paris in 2 bursts and had a beautiful day enjoying and exploring Paris in the springtime. I have only 2 regrets from my short stay in Paris on this spring day in April 26 years ago. The second can wait and makes for a wee chuckle. The first is a deep regret, as with time limited we saw the best sightseeing Paris could offer, except sadly for Notre Dame, which was the only place not ticked off my pre-visit list. With lunch cutting the day effectively into 2 short 3-hour segments, we simply dashed from one beautiful sight to another, ably testified to by the array of green metro tickets glued into my scrapbook. Yes, I was in my mid-20s, and yes, I was still keeping a childhood scrapbook. Mock all you wish, but it keeps the memories alive, and if I need to fall back on this excuse, I will. Walking toward the Eiffel Tower in such warm and bright sunshine was a joy, but I don't particularly have a head for heights, so I found the ascent all rather unpleasant, but strangely enjoyable too. The Arc de Triomphe was everything I hoped it would be, the Louvre and the surrounding Palace Square equally high in my affections, and after a stroll or 2 in the sunshine rather than the darkness of the metro, we trooped back to the hotel for an eagerly awaited lunch. I remember so much from the next 5 to 10 minutes of my day in the sun in Paris as we arrived back at the hotel to a huge chain of Liverpudlian bodies in a queue awaiting Paris's finest cuisine to be proffered to hundreds of hungry Reds. Finally the huge door to a banquet hall was opened and in we trooped, keeping the stereotype of the English ability to queue perfectly in order. As the servers slowly came to the front of the queue, a roar greeted the removal of the tops of these huge drums of food and we no doubt awaited our slow walk to the front, a quick lunch, and then back to the sightseeing. However, the queue began to move rather more quickly than we collectively anticipated, as we were well towards the back, but one by one, Reds filed past us with grave news. Well, grave news for the horse. Anyway. Yes, the immediate lip-smacking rumours that rumbled back towards us of curry soon began to have a more equine tinge to them, as Reds passed up on the opportunity of gnawing on some poor wild beast, and slowly but surely this vast reception, banquet, dining hall emptied amid grumblings of both the mouth and the stomach. I have no idea why Notre Dame was nixed by the overall group, but we spent the next couple of hours in the afternoon simply strolling alongside the River Seine and enjoying the sunshine. Steve no doubt regaled all and sundry with his tale of being in Paris for the 1981 European Cup final and buying a ticket on the day for some absurdly cheap figure. He liked to tell that tale, did Steve, but then again, he was a fair bit older than me, and I like to remind him of this very fact every time he trotted out his, albeit very impressive, story. Sorry, Steve. We boarded the coach for the trip to the stadium, and this is where things got messy, and in more ways than one. The lively coach I had described earlier was now mostly on an empty stomach, or rather stomachs full of alcohol, and not a curry almost certainly made from a horse. Some genius had stolen the tomato ketchup bottle from a Paris street vendor, and as we approached the drop-off point, said genius decided to squirt the contents over the people nearest to him on the coach, namely, and mostly, me. So before we could be marched to the stadium by Paris's finest garbed in their Robocop-inspired riot gear, I had to beg and borrow a new pair of trousers and a new pair of trainers, so I of course now look like an incredibly badly dressed man at the most important game of my tomato sauce covered life. Brilliant. The walk to the ground was hairy to say the least, and even in spite of the local Robocops, we were pelted with pretty much any and everything our Parisian cousins could lay their hands on, and I distinctly remember a short period when we were simply, in today's vernacular, kettled, cramped together and awaiting our path to be restored in the vague direction of the ground. It wasn't incredibly volatile, just all rather unpleasant, and a real portent to the football about to be unleashed upon us in the grand setting of the Parc des Princes. Growing up as I did in the late 1970s but cognitively in the early 1980s, Saturday afternoons in the UK were split between two TV channels, ITV and BBC One, and their programmes World of Sport and Grandstand. These two weekend shows every weekend, rain or shine, sport or indeed sometimes, especially ironically on World of Sport, no real recognisable sport at all. They were both English institutions and you simply flicked between the two stations, or rather my dad and my brother-in-laws did. And you had a plethora of sports: horse racing, badminton, hockey, wrestling, darts, snooker, and always with a keen eye on football, which they couldn't show due to live rights reasons, and rugby, which they could. So I grew up with the legends and the ghosts and the spectacles of England rugby games at the famed Parc des Princes. Rugby isn't my game at all, and I have zero interest in it, but I did as a very young kid, and similarly to Twickenham, England's home stadium, or Murrayfield, Scotland, the Parc des Princes always seemed somewhat mythical. That French roar, the national anthem, Allez les Bleus! Bill Beaumont or Will Carling being chaired off as winning England captains on enemy rugby territory. I have no idea or memory if they did, but it makes for a good story. And all good or great stories seem to gain a little more traction, a little more oxygen and a little more mystique when contained within the Parc des Princes. So I couldn't wait to be inside this cathedral of sport, even though the missiles being hurled at us as we approached this grand old lady of yore, and even though I looked like a man who'd gotten dressed in the dark and smelled like tomato sauce. I was in, and early enough to hang my Liverpool banner, a Swiss national flag with a simple Liverpool painted through the middle of the white cross, in a prime position right by the corner flag, and took my seat next to Steve. There were 3 hours or more to kill in a virtually empty stadium, but an empty, Parc des Princes Stadium, and boy oh boy did that mighty old lady look mighty fine to me. First half memories. I vividly recall the Reds, dressed this evening in their alternative cream kit, starting relatively well, and either foul was scored or had a goal disallowed or hit the post. Something happened of real promise early on. I can't recall exactly, but from then on Liverpool simply wilted and were thoroughly and completely outplayed by PSG. The hosts were simply too quick, too good, and Liverpool were utterly, utterly dreadful. The score at half-time was 2-0 to PSG and could and should have been more, with both goals scruffy giveaways by an apathetic defence and their notoriously eccentric goalkeeper, David James. Second half memories. I don't particularly recall this vividly, but no doubt I, as well as the approximately 4,000 fellow Reds in our corner of the Parc des Princes, all said the same mantra: keep it at 2-0 or keep the tie alive for the second leg. If we collectively did, then we almost collectively succeeded, as the game remained at 2-0 until the 84th minute, before Jerome Leroy scored a beautiful team goal and danced his celebratory jig right in front of us in the corner of that beautiful and now deafening stadium. 3-0, game over, and although there was still a second leg to come back at Anfield, this semi-final was over. Rotterdam dream dashed. This PSG team, although not great, was too great for this still fledgling and bloody defensively poor and error-prone Liverpool team. Steve and I grabbed 2 beers each on our return to the hotel and decamped to our room, and of course, with the game being replayed on the main Paris TV station as soon as we switched on that electrical box of doom, well, we had to watch it all over again, didn't we? The coach journey back to Dover was a quiet affair, and thankfully for Steve and I, that was our stop, much to the chagrin of everyone else aboard that particular express coach to Happy Town. However, we were being picked up by my girlfriend of the time who, whilst incredibly happy to do so, hadn't realised that with London delays and roadworks, it was a long haul from Portsmouth. So not only had we lost tamely and pathetically 3-0 in a European Cup semi-final, the majority of my clothes stunk of tomato sauce, and I was dressed like some kind of hobo. Now my beautiful girlfriend was absolutely bloody furious with me. 'Twas a long journey home, and after dropping off Steve and a furious girlfriend, I popped into the sanctuary, or so I thought, of my mum's, only to be greeted, in only a way she possibly could. Well, that was a bloody waste of money, wasn't it, Stephen? Thanks, Mum. Then, as I tried to explain the heartbreak I was feeling, as I desperately wanted to see the Reds in the European final, and this was now decidedly and seemingly off the table this season, my dear old mum came to the rescue with, "At least I saw your flag on the telly. I saw it loads of times." I've only watched edited highlights of this game, and this was back and immediately after returning home, and I can confirm my flag and gift from an employer in a long ago century is front and centre every time there's a corner kick at our end. There's scant highlights now, so I can't confirm this self-regarding nonsense for certain, but my flag did make fleeting viewings at both a League Cup final and a UEFA Cup final, but this was all for the future. In the here and now, the Liverpool team of 1997 had shown their true, twisted colours in the Parc des Princes, and they had just 14 days in which to concoct a mission impossible. They almost did so too, but the message had self-destructed in Paris. I managed to secure 4 tickets for the return leg of the semi-final, but was let down late in the day and offered my golden-hearted friend Gareth the extra 2 tickets the night before, and he snapped them up, so Steve and I were good to go. We used to leave around noon for a nighttime game at Anfield, but we aimed to leave a little earlier purely because it was a semi-final and an expected, but not quite, sell-out crowd. The one hitch in the plan was to have an argument with my beautiful girlfriend of the time the night before, and so hence, at the allotted time, my trusty car was nowhere in sight. This was of course before the advent of mobile telephones, and I had just one number, a work number, and thankfully she was there, and after a mad dash in a taxi, I was on my hands and knees on a Portsmouth High Street begging literal forgiveness for being an argumentative arsehole, and could I please have the damn car keys? Oh, sorry, please darling, could I have the car keys? I actually did go on my hands and knees, and in front of a plentiful supply of shoppers, on a busy high street and beg for the keys to the car. It was a European semi-final after all. The drive to Anfield that night was a real pleasure, as Gareth was on fine form and delivering laughter aplenty. His friend, name escapes me, was stoned as a stoat in the back of the car and chuckling to himself, and Steve was predicting we'd beat PSG easily. Rotterdam, here we come. I didn't join in, but the rest had a lovely time with an illegal natural plant, and by the time we arrived we were literally flying. Confidence was suddenly sky high for no sensible reason whatsoever, but the real joy of the night was seeing Gareth and his friend approaching Anfield for the first time. Not a bad first time, hey? A European semi-final. Time for a quick drink, and as we queued to enter the cop end, Gareth's friend disappeared, albeit briefly, before returning with some booty from the newly refurbished club superstore and a huge, thick, A4-sized history of Liverpool Football Club. Just a thanks, he said, for bringing me here tonight. I naturally brushed it off with a matey nod or a, oh, you really shouldn't have, when quick as a shot my new friend deadpanned, oh, I didn't buy it. I just saw it hanging around and I just picked it up and thought you'd like it. Blimey. We had fantastic seats on the cop end that was bouncing pre-kick-off, and even more so after 11 minutes from Robbie Fowler's drive into the bottom corner of the PSG net. God retrieved the ball from the net immediately, returning to the centre circle as the Reds still needed at least 2 goals to force even extra time. With perfect symmetry, and with now just 11 minutes remaining, skipper Mark Wright scored with a header at the cop end, and the Reds had 11 minutes in which to score again, not concede, to force extra time. They didn't concede, but they didn't score either, and despite the disappointment, the Reds got pretty much what they deserved over the 2 legs, nothing. It was a spirited fight back, but the first leg in Paris truly showed that this team was still one player, one result, one piece of luck, or one piece of proper defending away from being a team that could really challenge for European honours such as these. The 1996, 1997 and 1998 Liverpool teams were a joy to watch from a neutral point of view, as they guaranteed goals and free-flowing, exciting football. But when their defence wobbled, the entire team collapsed around them, alas. And that brings me to the end of another highly exciting edition from the Blackfoot Book Club, from a book I'm immensely proud of, Chasing the Impossible and the Sword of Damocles. True story. The horse, I've no idea if it was a horse, but that was the story of the time, and obviously I was a juvenile arsehole. I hope I haven't offended anybody. Paris in the springtime. Hello Steve, hope you're watching this. What memories, hey? Going back to the hotel to watch the game again. Blimey. And Gareth's friend, true story, walked into a newly refurbished club superstore. It was beneath the cop, which I think it now is. Brand spanking new superstore. In he wandered, came back out. There you go. What? Blimey. Thanks very much. Oh no, I didn't buy it. I just picked it up and thought you'd like it. Memories, memories, memories. Thanks very much for watching. I'm now rambling. I'm also not a public speaker. I'm not a public reader of books. So I try, and I hope you've enjoyed this. Canada Dry, session number 7, ended in peace and in solidarity. And I truly and sincerely thank you for watching. Peace everyone.